I never planned to keep my success a secret. But after a decade of watching my family mock my career choices while living in my private penthouse overlooking Central Park, I had grown accustomed to the irony of it all. My name is Olivia Winters, though the business world knows me only as O.W. Blackwood, the reclusive founder and CEO of Blackwood Innovations. To my family, I'm just their disappointing middle child who wastes her time with freelance tech consulting instead of joining the family law firm. The day everything changed started like any other. I was reviewing acquisition reports in my private office on the top floor of Blackwood Tower when my assistant, Michael, rushed in with an unusual expression on his face. "Ms. Winters, you need to see these job applications," he said, placing a tablet in front of me. They just came through HR. I glanced at the screen and nearly choked on my coffee. There, in pristine digital formatting, were the resumes of my sister Diane and my brother James. Both had applied for executive positions at Blackwood Innovations. "There's more," Michael added, scrolling to another document. "Your father's law firm is also pitching their services to our legal department. The meeting is scheduled for next week." I leaned back in my chair, memories flooding back from 10 years ago. I was fresh out of college with a computer science degree, pitching my ideas for revolutionary software architecture to my family over dinner. "Tech startups are a dime a dozen," my father had scoffed, barely looking up from his legal briefs. "Winters and Associates has been a respected law firm for 3 generations. That's real success, not this coding nonsense." Diane, 2 years older and already a junior partner at the firm, had smirked. "Come on, Dad. Let her play with her computers. She can always come work as our IT support when she fails." Only my younger brother James had shown any interest, but even that was condescending. "Maybe you could build us a better website for the firm," he had suggested, as if that was the height of technological achievement. I left that dinner knowing I would never convince them to see my vision. So I stopped trying. Instead, I took my savings, borrowed against my trust fund, and started working in absolute secrecy. The first few years were brutal. I worked out of a tiny apartment, taking legitimate freelance jobs while building my company on the side. Every family gathering became an exercise in restraint as they pitied my struggling career. "Still doing that freelance thing?" became their constant refrain, always tinged with mock concern and real condescension. What they didn't know was that my freelance thing was a cover for building one of the most innovative software companies in the world. Blackwood Innovations revolutionized enterprise architecture, cloud computing, and artificial intelligence. By the 5th year, we were valued at over $2 billion. By the 8th year, we had gone public, and my personal worth exceeded the combined value of every law firm in New York. Through it all, I maintained my cover. I kept my small apartment for family visits. Though I lived in a penthouse, I drove an old Honda to family functions, while my collection of luxury cars sat in a private garage. I endured their pitying looks while donating more to charity each year than their firm made in profit. Now, staring at their job applications, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to reject them immediately, to let them feel a fraction of the dismissal they had shown me. But another part saw an opportunity for something more satisfying. "Michael," I said finally, "schedule the interviews. But don't conduct them in the executive suite. Use the small conference room on the 15th floor." He raised an eyebrow. "The one we use for junior positions?" "Exactly. And don't tell them anything about meeting with O.W. Blackwood. Let them think they're interviewing with middle management." After Michael left, I opened my laptop and began researching my siblings' recent careers. Diane had left our father's firm 2 years ago after a failed attempt to modernize their practice. James had bounced between several firms, never quite living up to our father's expectations. Now they both wanted to join the tech world they had once mocked. My phone buzzed. A text from Diane. "Hey sis, I just applied to this amazing tech company. Put in a good word if you know anyone there." I smiled at the irony. For 10 years, she had never once asked about my work or shown any interest in tech. Now that she needed something, suddenly my connections mattered. "I'll see what I can do," I replied, knowing that tomorrow would change everything. That evening, I stood in my penthouse, watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold. On my desk sat an old photo from my college graduation, the last time my family had shown any real pride in me. Even then, it was tempered with concern about my impractical career choice. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Ms. Winters, your siblings' interviews are scheduled for tomorrow at 10 a.m. Your father's law firm pitch is set for 2 p.m. Are you sure about this?" I thought about all the family dinners where I sat quietly while they bragged about their legal victories. All the holidays where they treated me like a cautionary tale. All the times they could have supported me, but chose to judge instead. "Yes, Michael, I'm sure. Tomorrow, the Winters family will finally learn what real success looks like." I picked up the photo, studying my younger self's hopeful expression. Back then, I had wanted so desperately to prove myself to them. Now, I realized that the person I really needed to prove myself to was me. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, taking my private elevator to the 15th floor. The small conference room had been prepared exactly as I requested. Simple furnishings, no view of the city, nothing to suggest the true power of Blackwood Innovations. Through the security feed, I watched my siblings arrive separately in the lobby. Diane wore an expensive suit, her confidence evident in every movement. James looked more nervous, constantly adjusting his tie. They were escorted to the 15th floor, neither of them realizing that their supposedly struggling sister was watching from the executive suite above, about to change their world forever. Through the security monitors, I watched my siblings sit nervously in the small conference room. Diane kept checking her reflection in her compact mirror, while James drummed his fingers on the table. Neither of them had any idea that their lives were about to change completely. "Send in the first interviewer," I instructed Michael through my earpiece. Right on cue, Sarah Chen, my chief technology officer, entered the room. I had chosen her specifically because she was young, female, and brilliant. Everything my siblings had dismissed throughout my career. "Good morning," Sarah said, sitting down with their resumes. "I'm conducting initial interviews for Blackwood Innovations. Let's start with your technical backgrounds." Diane straightened in her chair, adopting the confident pose she perfected in courtrooms. "While I don't have direct tech experience, I've overseen several digital transformation projects at law firms." "Really?" Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Could you elaborate on the technical aspects of those projects?" I watched Diane flounder, trying to mask her lack of knowledge with legal jargon. James wasn't doing much better, his claims of understanding the tech industry falling apart under Sarah's precise questioning. After 20 excruciating minutes, Sarah thanked them and left. My siblings exchanged worried glances, their confidence visibly shaken. "Send in round 2, I instructed. This time, it was Marcus Rodriguez, my head of innovation. He began asking about their views on emerging technologies, cryptocurrency, and artificial intelligence. Their answers were painfully outdated, filled with buzzwords, but lacking any real understanding. Is this a joke? Diane finally snapped, her frustration breaking through. We're here to interview for executive positions, not tech support. Where is Otagu Blackwood? We should be meeting with actual decision makers. Marcus kept his expression neutral, though I could see him fighting back a smile. Ms. Winters, I assure you this is standard procedure. However, if you prefer to leave... No. James cut in quickly. We apologize. Please continue. 3 more interviewers followed, each one expertly exposing my siblings' lack of qualifications. By the final round, both Diane and James looked thoroughly defeated. Ms. Winters, Michael's voice came through my earpiece. Your father's team has arrived for the legal services pitch. Perfect timing, I smiled. Have them wait in the main conference room. I'll handle this personally. I took my private elevator down to the 15th floor, smoothing my designer suit and checking my reflection. 10 years of hiding my success had led to this moment. The door to the small conference room opened, and I walked in. The look on my siblings' faces was priceless, confusion, then shock, then dawning horror as they realized what was happening. Olivia? Diane stammered. What are you doing here? We're in the middle of interviews. Actually, I said, taking a seat at the head of the table. You're at the end of your interviews, and they haven't gone well. James leaned forward, his face flushing. What do you mean? How would you know? Because I own this company. I cut him off calmly. I am Otagu Blackwood. The silence that followed was deafening. Diane's mouth opened and closed without sound. James gripped the table edge so hard his knuckles turned white. That's impossible, Diane finally managed. You're a freelancer. You work from coffee shops. I laughed, the sound echoing in the small room. No, Diane. That's just what I let you believe. While you were all pitying my career choices, I was building this. I gestured around us. Blackwood Innovations, a Fortune 500 company worth more than every law firm in New York combined. But James was struggling to form words. All these years? Yes, I nodded. All these years, while you mocked my coding nonsense and offered me IT support jobs, I was revolutionizing enterprise software. While you bragged about your legal victories at family dinners, I was closing billion-dollar deals. While you dismissed me as a failure, I became one of the most successful tech entrepreneurs in the world. Diane's face had turned an interesting shade of gray. Why didn't you tell us? Why should I have? When did any of you ever show genuine interest in my work? When did you ever offer support instead of condescension? I pulled out their resumes, laying them on the table. And now here you are, applying for jobs at my company. Not because you're qualified. These interviews have proven you're not. But because you heard Blackwood Innovations was the next big thing. Olivia, please, James started, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. Right now, our father is waiting upstairs to pitch his firm's legal services. He has no idea he's about to try to sell to his own daughter, the one he said would never amount to anything in tech. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. I have a meeting to attend. Michael will show you out. Oh, and don't bother waiting for callbacks about the jobs. You're not qualified. As I reached the door, Diane called out, her voice shaking. You can't just leave it like this. I turned back, meeting her eyes. Actually, I can. I spent 10 years letting you all believe what you wanted about me. Now you get to live with the truth. And believe me, this is just the beginning. Walking away from that conference room, I felt lighter than I had in years. But my day wasn't over yet. My father was waiting upstairs, about to experience his own moment of revelation. The best part, he had no idea what was coming. The executive conference room of Blackwood Tower offered a stunning view of Manhattan's skyline. My father, Richard Winters, stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back straight and proud as always. He was surrounded by 3 junior partners from his firm, all of them clutching presentation materials and practicing their best corporate smiles. I watched them through the glass wall for a moment, remembering all the times I'd stood in his office as a child, dreaming of making him proud. Now, standing in my own tower, I realized those dreams had changed. I no longer needed his pride. I had my own. "Miss Blackwood is ready for you," Michael announced, opening the door. My father turned, his practiced smile freezing as I walked in. For a moment, confusion crossed his face, then shock, then disbelief. "Olivia," he stammered, "what are you doing here?" I sat down at the head of the conference table, enjoying the moment. "Hello, Dad. I believe you're here to pitch legal services to Blackwood Innovations." The junior partners exchanged bewildered looks. One of them quickly flipped through his notes, probably wondering if they'd somehow missed this connection in their research. "I don't understand," my father said, still standing. "We have a meeting with LW Blackwood." "Yes," I smiled. "You do. Please, sit down." Realization dawned slowly on his face as he sank into a chair. You're LW Blackwood?" "Yes, founder and CEO of Blackwood Innovations, the company you're so eager to represent." I turned to the junior partners. "I apologize, but this meeting needs to be private. Family matter." They practically ran from the room, leaving me alone with my father. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. "How?" he finally managed. "How did I build a multi-billion-dollar tech company while you thought I was struggling? Or how did I keep it secret from a family of supposedly brilliant lawyers?" "Both," he whispered. I leaned back in my chair. "I built it the same way I tried to tell you I would, 10 years ago at that dinner. Remember? When you said tech startups were a dime a dozen." He flinched at the memory. "As for keeping it secret," I continued, "that was surprisingly easy. You were all so convinced I was a failure that you never bothered to look closer. Did you know Blackwood Innovations has been featured in Forbes 12 times? That I've been on CNBC? That our IPO was the biggest tech offering of the decade? But your apartment, your car, props," I said simply. "I kept them to maintain the illusion you all preferred, the struggling daughter who couldn't match up to her sibling's success." My father's face had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. Diane and James, they applied for jobs here. Yes, they did. They just finished their interviews, in fact. It didn't go well. He straightened in his chair, some of his old authority returning. "Now see here, Olivia. They're your family. Surely you could." "Could what, Dad?" I cut him off. "Give them jobs they're not qualified for. Like you offered me that 8 support position at your firm?" I pulled out his firm's proposal. "Or should I just hire your firm because we're family? Is that how you think business works?" "That's not fair," he protested weakly. "No. What's not fair is spending a decade dismissing your daughter's dreams and abilities because they didn't match your narrow definition of success." I stood up, walking to the windows. "Look at this building, Dad. Look at what I built while you were telling everyone I was wasting my potential." He joined me at the window, his reflection showing a mix of emotions I'd never seen before: shame, regret, and something that might have been pride. "Why tell us now?" he asked quietly. "Because it was time. Because I'm tired of maintaining the lie. And because—" I turned to face him. "I wanted you all to learn an important lesson about judging people. And have we learned it?" A hint of his old sarcasm crept into his voice. "I don't know, Dad. Have you? Your children just applied for jobs at a tech company you said would never succeed. Your firm is pitching services to the daughter you said would never amount to anything. What do you think?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city. Finally, he turned to me. "I was wrong about you, Olivia. I've been wrong for a very long time." "Yes, you have." I walked back to my desk and pressed the intercom. "Michael, please show Mr. Winters out. And cancel all his firm's future appointments with us." "Wait," my father said quickly. "You're not even going to consider our proposal." I met his eyes steadily. "No, Dad. Just like you never really considered my ideas or potential. The difference is, I'm making this decision based on business merit, not personal bias." As he reached the door, he paused. "What happens now? With the family? That depends on all of you. I'm done hiding my success, done playing the role of the disappointing daughter. If you want a relationship with me now, it will have to be on different terms." After he left, I sat in my office watching the sunset paint the city in shades of gold. My phone had been buzzing continuously. Messages from my mother, my siblings, even distant relatives who had somehow already heard the news. I opened one from Diane. "I'm so sorry. For everything. Can we talk?" Then one from James. "I understand now why you kept it secret. I wouldn't have trusted us either." Finally, one from my father. "You've built something remarkable. Not despite ignoring my advice, but because you had the courage to follow your own path. I'm sorry I couldn't see that sooner." I didn't respond to any of them immediately. Instead, I called Michael in. "Cancel my dinner plans," I told him. "I need you to set up something else." The next evening, I hosted a family dinner in my penthouse, my real home, not the small apartment I'd used as a cover. They arrived one by one, their eyes wide, as they took in the luxury they'd never known I had. "Before we eat," I announced, once they were all seated, "I want to make something clear. This dinner isn't about forgiveness or pretending the past didn't happen. It's about moving forward honestly. Can we do that?" They nodded, looking appropriately humbled. "Good," I smiled. "Then let me tell you the real story of how I built Blackwood Innovations. No more secrets, no more hiding, just the truth." As I began my story, I saw something new in their eyes. Not pity, not condescension, but genuine respect. And for the first time in 10 years, I felt completely free. The next morning, I walked into my office wearing success openly. No more pretenses, no more hiding. My family had learned their lesson about underestimating people, and I had learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't proving others wrong, it's proving yourself right. The press got wind of the story, of course. "Tech billionaire's secret identity revealed" became the headline of the week. But I didn't care anymore. I had spent 10 years building something extraordinary while my family believed I was failing. Now they would spend the rest of their lives knowing that their biggest failure wasn't in business. It was in failing to see the success right in front of them. And that was worth more than any fortune I'd built. The day my grandmother died, I inherited 2 things: her fortune and her wisdom. Sometimes, she had written in her final letter, People show their truest selves only when they think you have nothing. I was 23 when I received that letter, along with documents detailing my inheritance, $50 million in diversified investments, real estate holdings across 3 continents, and controlling shares in several major corporations. My grandmother, Eleanor Wright, had built an empire from nothing, but she'd done it quietly. The world knew the businesses, but few knew the woman behind them. My parents never understood her. To them, Eleanor was just the frustratingly frugal mother-in-law who refused to fund their lavish lifestyle. They didn't know she was actually one of the wealthiest women in Chicago. That was exactly how she wanted it. Sophia, my mother's voice cut through my thoughts as I sat at our dining room table, still holding the letter. Did that grandmother of yours leave us anything useful, or was it just another collection of her precious books? I looked up at Diana Maxwell, the woman who had spent the last 20 years trying to mold me into her version of the perfect daughter and failing miserably. She stood in our kitchen doorway, immaculately dressed as always, disappointment etched into every line of her face. Just books, I lied smoothly, tucking the letter away, and some old photographs. She sighed dramatically. Typical. That woman never understood the importance of maintaining proper social standing. Do you know what the Hendersons would say if they could see our 10-year-old car? I did know. I'd heard about the Hendersons, the Blackwells, and every other family my mother desperately tried to impress for the past 2 decades. Their opinions mattered more to her than oxygen. I'm sure they're too busy with their own lives to care about our car, Mom. That's exactly the kind of attitude that worries me, she snapped. You're just like her. No understanding of how the world really works. Thank God Alexander has more sense. Ah, yes, Alexander, my younger brother, the golden child. Even now, at 20, he had never worked a day in his life. Why should he? Mom and Dad funded his every whim, from his failed startup ventures to his collection of luxury watches. Speaking of Alexander, my mother continued, brightening considerably, he's just been accepted into Harvard Business School. Your father and I are throwing a celebration dinner tonight. All the right people will be there. Wear something appropriate. Her eyes swept critically over my simple dress and minimal jewelry. I nodded, not mentioning that I'd graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern's business school last year. There had been no party for that. Instead, my parents had spent that weekend at Alexander's amateur golf tournament. Later that evening, I sat in my small apartment above the bookstore where I supposedly worked, reviewing my grandmother's documents. The bookstore job was actually a front. I owned the building and 3 others on the block through one of my grandmother's holding companies. But as far as my family knew, I was just a struggling bookkeeper, living paycheck to paycheck. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Don't be late tonight. The Blackwells are bringing their son James. Wear the blue dress your mother bought you. James Blackwell. Of course. They were still trying to orchestrate that match, seeing him as my ticket to proper society. If they only knew that I could buy the Blackwells company 3 times over. I arrived at my parents' house precisely on time, wearing a simple black dress instead of the gaudy blue one my mother preferred. The valet? Yes, they had hired a valet for the evening, gave me a sympathetic look as I handed him the keys to my modest Honda Civic. Inside, the house was transformed. Crystal champagne flutes caught the light from the grand chandelier, elegant flower arrangements adorned every surface, and the air was thick with expensive perfume and pretension. Sophia. My mother's voice carried across the foyer, tight with barely concealed irritation. I thought I told you to wear the blue dress. "This one was clean," I replied simply. She closed her eyes briefly, gathering patience. "At least try to make a good impression on James. His family's company is very successful." I bit back a smile, remembering the report on my desk about Blackwell Industries' recent financial troubles. Their success was mostly smoke and mirrors at this point. Alexander chose that moment to make his entrance, drawing every eye in the room. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo that probably cost more than my supposed monthly salary. "There's my boy," our father boomed, clapping him on the shoulder. "Harvard Business School's newest star." I watched as person after person congratulated him, praising his natural business acumen and brilliant mind. None of them seemed to remember his 3 failed businesses, all funded by our parents' increasingly strained resources. James Blackwell sidled up to me, champagne in hand. "Sophia," he smiled, all white teeth and practiced charm. "Still working at that little bookstore?" "Someone has to pay the bills," I said mildly. He laughed as if I'd told a particularly amusing joke. "You know, my family's company always has positions available for motivated individuals." "I'll keep that in mind." The evening continued in this vein, a parade of wealth and subtle condescension. I watched my parents fawn over Alexander, making endless excuses for his past failures while pointing to his imagined future successes. But beneath the sparkle and shine, I could see the cracks. The way my father's hand shook slightly as he signed the catering bill. The tight look around my mother's eyes when someone mentioned their recent vacation. Actually, a desperate business trip to save a failing investment. They were in trouble, though they died before admitting it. Years of funding Alexander's expensive education, failed ventures, and extravagant lifestyle had taken their toll. The mansion they were so proud of, the one they'd remortgaged 3 times to maintain appearances, was slowly slipping through their fingers. What they didn't know was that I'd been watching, waiting, and quietly buying up their debt through various shell companies. Every desperate loan, every refinanced mortgage, I owned them all. As I drove home that night in my sensible Honda, I thought about my grandmother's words. People do show their truest selves when they think you have nothing. And soon, very soon, my family was going to show exactly who they really were. The signs of my parents' financial collapse became impossible to ignore, even for them. It started with small things. The household staff was temporarily reduced. Their country club membership became inactive. And suddenly my mother discovered a passion for vintage fashion. But Alexander's lifestyle never changed. Even as the family finances crumbled, my parents continued funding his every whim. The day I saw him drive past my bookstore in a brand new Porsche, I knew they had finally hit rock bottom. I was in my real office, not the cramped bookstore back room where I pretended to work, but my actual office on the 47th floor of downtown Chicago's most prestigious building. As CEO of Wright Investments, I had a perfect view of the city my grandmother had helped build. "Miss Wright," my assistant Sarah buzzed in. "Your brother just made another withdrawal from your parents' emergency fund." I pulled up the banking records on my screen. There it was, $175,000 transferred to a luxury car dealership. Money they definitely didn't have. "How much do they have left?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Less than $50,000, Mom. And their mortgage payment is due next week." I leaned back in my chair, thinking about the careful web I'd woven over the past year. Through various holding companies, I owned not just their mortgage, but all their outstanding debt. Every credit card, every loan, every desperate attempt to maintain their facade of wealth. I controlled it all. Schedule the foreclosure notices, I instructed Sarah. It's time. The next morning, I arrived at the bookstore early, knowing what was coming. Right on schedule, my mother burst through the door, her designer handbag genuine but last season. Sophia. Her voice was shrill with panic. Something terrible has happened. The bank. They're saying they're going to foreclose on the house. I looked up from the ledger I was pretending to review. What? How is that possible? Your father. There have been some business setbacks. But it's just temporary. We just need a little help. She reached across the counter, gripping my hand. Darling, how much do you have saved? I almost laughed. After years of mocking my little bookstore job, she was now eyeing my supposed savings like a lifeline. Mom, I make $35,000 a year. After rent and bills, I'd barely save anything. Her face fell. But surely you must have something. An emergency fund? I have about $3,000 saved. I lied. But that's everything. We need it, she said immediately. Just until your father's deals come through. Alexander has some very promising ventures in the works. I sat back studying her. What about Alexander's new Porsche? Couldn't he sell that? Don't be ridiculous, she snapped. He needs to maintain appearances. How else will he attract the right kind of investors? And my appearance doesn't matter. That's different. She waved her hand vaguely. You're just not in those circles anyway. In those circles, I thought about the charity gala I'd be hosting next month as Eleanor Wright's heir, where half of Chicago's elite would be in attendance. But my mother didn't know about that. I'm sorry, Mom. I can't empty my savings account. I need to pay rent. She stood up, anger replacing desperation. How can you be so selfish? After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? The question hung in the air between us. For a moment, confusion crossed her face, as if she were genuinely trying to remember any significant thing they'd done to help me succeed. We gave you a good home, an education. The education I paid for with student loans, you mean? The same loans you refused to help with because you were funding Alexander's third startup. That's not fair. Alexander has vision. He just needs support too. Get out. My voice was quiet but firm. Excuse me. Get out of my store, Mom. And don't ask me for money again. She left in a fury of slammed doors and threats, but I wasn't worried. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. That evening, I received another call, this time from my father. Sophia, we need to discuss this situation like adults, he began, his business negotiation voice in full effect. Your mother tells me you were quite unhelpful today. I can't give you my savings, Dad. Now listen here, young lady. This family has a reputation to maintain. We can't have the house foreclosed. Do you have any idea what that would do to our standing? To Alexander's prospects? I thought about the foreclosure notices being prepared in my lawyer's office at that very moment. Maybe Alexander could help? He just bought a new Porsche. He must have money. That's different. That was an investment in his future. He needs to project success to be successful. And what about my future? He sighed heavily. Sophia, let's be realistic. You work in a bookstore. Your future is, well, it's already set, isn't it? But Alexander has real potential. The words stung, even though I'd heard variations of them my entire life. I'm sorry, Dad. I can't help. Then you're no daughter of mine. The line went dead. I sat in my luxurious office, looking out over the city lights, and smiled. Soon they would learn exactly what kind of daughter I was. The bankruptcy hearing was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. on a crisp October morning. I arrived early, watching from my car as my family pulled up in Alexander's Porsche, apparently the only vehicle they had left. My mother's designer outfit was pristine, but last season. My father's suit looked tired, and even Alexander's usual smirk seemed strained. They hadn't seen me yet, didn't know I was here. As far as they knew, their wayward daughter was still counting pennies at her bookstore. I waited until they entered the courthouse before following. Inside my briefcase were documents that would change everything: proof of ownership, transfer records, and the truth about who really controlled their fate. The bankruptcy courtroom was already filling up. Chicago's elite had come to witness the fall of the Maxwell family. My parents sat in the front row, heads held high despite their circumstances. Alexander slouched beside them, tapping on his phone. "All rise," the bailiff called as Judge Marion Wheeler entered. She was known for her no-nonsense approach to bankruptcy cases, particularly those involving what she called self-inflicted financial wounds. Case number 2847, Maxwell Family Bankruptcy Petition, she announced, reviewing the papers before her. "I see the creditor's representative is present." This was my cue. I stood up from my seat in the back, straightening my channel suit. Not that my family would recognize it as such. They'd never seen me wear anything but off-the-rack clothing. "Yes, Your Honor." Sophia Wright, representing Wright Investments. The reaction was immediate. My mother's perfectly maintained facade cracked as she whirled around. My father's face went pale, and Alexander actually dropped his phone. "Sophia?" My mother's voice was barely a whisper. I walked to the front of the courtroom, placing my briefcase on the creditor's table. "Good morning, Mother. Father. Alexander." "What is the meaning of this?" my father demanded, starting to rise before his lawyer pulled him back down. Judge Wheeler banged her gavel. "Mr. Maxwell, you will maintain order in my courtroom. Ms. Wright, please proceed." "Your Honor, Wright Investments holds all outstanding debts of the Maxwell family, including their primary residence mortgage, personal loans, and credit accounts. The total sum is approximately $12.7 million. "That's impossible," Alexander blurted out. "Sophia works in a bookstore." I smiled. "Actually, I own the bookstore, along with the building it's in, and most of the block. I'm the CEO of Wright Investments, formerly known as Eleanor Wright Enterprises." The courtroom erupted in whispers. My grandmother had been a legend in Chicago business circles, though few had known her face. "Order," Judge Wheeler commanded. "Ms. Wright, continue." 3 years ago, I inherited my grandmother's entire estate, valued at approximately $50 million. During that time, I watched as my parents repeatedly refinanced their home to fund my brother's failed ventures and maintain their lifestyle. Through various holding companies, I purchased all their debt. My mother was openly crying now, her carefully applied makeup running. My father sat frozen, perhaps finally understanding the magnitude of their situation. However, I continued, "I'm not here to demand immediate repayment. I have a proposal." I withdrew a document from my briefcase. "I'm willing to restructure all outstanding debts under the following conditions. First, Alexander's spending privileges will be completely cut off. He'll need to find actual employment, not another startup opportunity." Alexander jumped up. "You can't do this. I'm your brother." "Sit down, Mr. Maxwell," Judge Wheeler ordered. "Continue, Ms. Wright." "Second, my parents will undergo financial counseling and maintain strict budget oversight. Third, they will sell the mansion and move into a more modest home, which I have already purchased for them. This is ridiculous. My father finally found his voice. You're our daughter. You can't treat us this way. I turned to face them fully for the first time. Can't I? For 20 years, you treated me like I was nothing. You mocked my job, dismissed my achievements, and poured every resource into Alexander, while leaving me to fend for myself. When you needed help, you demanded my savings, all $3,000 you thought I had, without a second thought. We gave you everything, my mother protested. No, Mother. You gave Alexander everything. I built this myself. Or rather, Grandmother helped me build it. She taught me that true character shows when people think you have nothing, and you've shown yours very clearly. Judge Wheeler reviewed the proposed agreement. The terms seemed fair, considerably more generous than standard bankruptcy proceedings. Do the Maxwells wish to accept? My father's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. They really had no choice. It was this or lose everything. We accept, my father ground out. Excellent, I said, retrieving more documents. Here are the keys to your new house. It's a lovely 3-bedroom in Laken Park. The moving company will arrive tomorrow. Oh, and Alexander? I turned to my brother. The dealership has been instructed to repossess the Porsche. I've arranged for a used Toyota to be delivered instead. The next hour was a blur of signatures and legal proceedings. My parents barely looked at me, their shame and anger palpable. Alexander stormed out as soon as he could, probably to move money I'd already frozen. As I left the courthouse, I heard quick footsteps behind me. Why? My mother's voice was small. Why did you let us fall so far before revealing the truth? I turned to face her, because you needed to learn. Money isn't what makes a person valuable, Mother. Neither are appearances or social standing. I wanted you to understand what it feels like to be judged for your bank account rather than your character. And now, will you ever forgive us? That depends on you. The house I bought you is nice. Not luxurious, but comfortable. Your new budget is reasonable. Not extravagant, but adequate. What you do with this second chance is up to you. I walked to my car, not the Honda Civic they were familiar with, but a sleek Mercedes I'd kept hidden until now. Oh, and Mother, I called back. That blue dress you wanted me to wear to Alexander's party, I bought the company that makes it last year. They've discontinued that particular style. It was hideous. The look on her face was worth every second of the past 3 years. 3 months later, I sat in my office reviewing reports. My parents had actually stuck to their budget, attending financial counseling without complaint. Alexander had finally taken a real job, entry level, of course, and was learning what actual work felt like. On my desk sat a new photo frame containing an old picture of my grandmother and me in front of her favorite bookstore, the same one I now owned. Her words from that final letter still rang true. Sometimes people show their truest selves only when they think you have nothing. But she had taught me something else too. Sometimes the greatest power lies not in wealth itself, but in choosing when to reveal it.